Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Okay, this is going to be one of those where I'll feel like one of those turning things, but good morning. I am in, 4.5 months in, which has felt, they call them kind of commissioner years. So every time I talk to my mom on FaceTime at night with the girls, she's just like, wow. And I'm like, So it's been just a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I think the thing that I noticed the most about Tennessee and what I've been, I would say, just deeply moved by is that everywhere I go, when I'm meeting someone, the first question they ask is usually like, oh, how do you like Tennessee? And then the second is, how are your kids adjusting? I talk a lot about my girls. They're the most important thing in my very, very small little world. But the fact that people talk about family and kids and that that is a priority is something that is unique to this state. It's not something that I've experienced anywhere else. I usually start, and I will always start talking about my mom because I love my mom. And she was a 37-year vet teacher. Retired now as soon as my older daughter was born. She was like, and here I stop. I found the most important child in the world, and her name is Eleanor, and no other child can possibly exist. So she retired when we had our first daughter. But I start talking about her because she is the reason I'm in education, and my sister's a teacher, a middle school math teacher. I married an educator, my sister married an educator, and most of my mom's siblings and their spouses are also educators. So it is a family tradition. And I don't know if I would be in education if she wasn't my mom. So I talk a lot about, I was 6 weeks old, she's a single parent. For most of my upbringing. And so at 6 weeks, her first story about me is, I don't remember the first 6 weeks. It was kind of a disaster. And I was like, I get that. After I had Ellie, I was like, I get that. But she brought me to work because she had to go back to work and put me in the closet in her classroom because she said, my kids aren't going to have a long-term sub. And I need to get back to work, and we're still figuring out daycare. And, it was a while ago, so that was still allowed. And that's what she did. And so I said, my first time in a classroom was at 6 weeks old. And that's just how she had raised me for years. And so she taught summer school for most of my upbringing. And part of my grandfather came from a pretty traditional Quaker family in Pennsylvania. And it was, you work hard, you pull up yourself by your own bootstraps, and you treat everyone the way that they should be treated, period. That was it. And so she said, you work hard. There's no such thing as a summer break, which, hard words for a small child. But I went to summer school with her every single summer. And she taught in this area, Del Paso Heights Elementary, which was in the north area of my hometown of Sacramento. Very, very different than the school that she eventually moved me to. It was rich in a lot of things. It was not rich in money. And when I had the opportunity to go into her classroom, especially in 4th grade, that's when she told me a little bit more about the achievement gap. My best friends at her school, and they were my best friends summer after summer after summer, they were still learning phonics in 3rd and 4th grade. She looped with them 4th, 5th, and 6th, and I was reading chapter books because I was lucky enough to have an educator as a parent. And those experiences with her students who were smart and remarkable and wonderful, but just didn't have access to the same opportunities that I was so fortunate to have access to, stuck with me. And she told me year after year the same thing she told my sister, which is you have a responsibility to your friends, you have a responsibility to your community, and you have a responsibility to the other children in this country. And the best thing you can do is be a teacher. She was the best salesman ever of education. And she tells my little girls every night, like, well, you can be a teacher, don't forget. My daughter wants to be lots of things. She wants to be a dinosaur vet. Tragic. we had to explain some things. So we said, there's large animals, and she's like, dinosaurs, because they sound like they're stuffed up all the time. And I was like, oh, bless your heart, Ellie, but it's not going to happen for you. Or she wants to be a ninja warrior superhero that doesn't wear a dress, like very specific. My little daughter wants to be in the movies, so they're very different, but my mom said, you can do all of that. You can be a theater teacher, you could be a science teacher, you can be, so it's always, whatever, teacher. And then my dad's in the background just shaking his head going, Kathy, Kathy, Kathy. But that's my mom. And it's why I'm in this work, and it's why even when I veered and said, well, maybe I'm going to be an attorney, maybe I'll be a doctor, maybe I will be, and then fill in the blank, I kept coming around back to education because I think it matters so much. My first day of kindergarten, my mom had to get to work because it was her first day of school, and I had this pink backpack, and I remember she sat me down on the bench, and she'd kiss my forehead, and she'd say, I love you very much, it's your first day, and pumped me up, and then she had to go. because she had to go see her kids. And I remember vividly Miss McDonald, who was my kindergarten teacher. She taught for 1 year, and then was starting her family. And I remember her coming out of the door and sitting next to me on that very first day of kindergarten when you're scared and you're a little bit alone and you're not quite sure what's about to happen. And she sat down and she said, "I think you're going to be great. Do you want to come help me?" And she brought me into her classroom, and I got to stack the books. And it was such a small gesture, but it's what our teachers do every day. They recognize the unique and special things about all of our students individually, and they offer just one thing, even just one thing in a day. You're special. I believe in you. You're smart. And that makes all the difference. Miss McDonald ended up living on the other side of the fence, which, I don't know if I was lucky or she was lucky or we were both lucky, but I see her probably 6 or 7 times a year. And it is a really special thing to see her and have her talk about what it was like to teach kindergarten when I became a principal, or for her to see me go from being that little 4-year-old, because it was, again, a long time ago, you could start kindergarten at 4, but be a little 4-year-old and then become the commissioner in Tennessee. There's something really magical about education that if you're not in it, you just don't get. You don't get that idea of being able to see your students go from little kids to adults and then have their own kids in schools. You don't get to see what my mom sees, which is her students who write her constantly, 15, 20, 30 years later, and say, "You did this and it made such a difference for me." I'm just starting to get that with my students in Baltimore who now have 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders in the system. And they say things like, "Miss Lee," because I used to be Miss Lee, "it was so important that you did a home visit for me every year, that you saw where I lived, that you met my family, that you cared about me as a person, and I'm doing the same thing." Lawrence is in Ohio, and he is building new homes for children who are homeless because he was. And he feels like he can do something different. And what I know about this group, and what I think JC has been just phenomenal about in talking about all of you, is that at the end of the day, teachers are leaders. They are leaders. They lead their classrooms, they lead their communities, they lead their schools. And the people in this room embody that so deeply. And right now in Tennessee, it is more important than ever that we have our educators as leaders saying what it is that you need, what it is that you want, what it is that's going to impact your classrooms each and every day. Because we can't do that from a building in Nashville. It's just not possible to understand every school community and every child the way that you do every day. We've got to have educators who advocate for their children, who stand up and say, "This is the funding that we need. These are the resources that we need. This is the support. This is the professional development." I've been very, very lucky and honored to read 25,539 educator responses from the survey this year. Read every single one. We've had over 4,000 responses to the updated strategic planning document that I hope you continue to provide feedback on. I read every single one of the teacher responses because it is the best way to understand what is happening in our schools and our communities like no other. Because schools and our children represent what's happening in our state. They are the embodiment of how we raise our children, how we think about our community, and where we want to go. I just want to end with, I tell this story a lot. I didn't start telling it until I came to Tennessee, but a lot of times people say, like, "What are you about? What is it that drives you every day?" And it certainly is my mom and my sister, and when I look at my kids, they wake up and I send them to public school here in Metro, that drives me. Being a parent changed myself as an educator. But more importantly, I think about these two simultaneous moments, and a couple of you might have heard me tell this story, but it is the most important story, I would say, of my life. And it is when I became a principal, which is a really tough job. Not as hard as being a teacher, but it is a tough job. And I said the most important thing that I can do is meet every single family, because that's what I did as a teacher, and it mattered so much to my kids. And so when I was becoming a principal, I met with every family, and I sat down with this woman named Deshawn. And she had a little 4-year-old named Sean, little Sean. He is my favorite, I will say that. I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but Sean is my favorite student. And it's okay, he was little and now he's big. It makes me sad. But to Sean, I said, what do you want for Sean? And she said what parents say. We all say, we want our child to be happy, safe, healthy, successful, whatever that might mean. And then Deshawn got very, very quiet. And she took a step back and she said, I didn't go to college. I didn't graduate from high school. But I want more for my Sean. I think he can be somebody. And I don't know how to give that to him. But I think that you can. I think that the school can. So I'm giving you my baby. And I was a very, very young principal. I understood the magnitude of what she was saying. I understood the gravitas and the importance. But I wasn't yet a parent. I was still learning how to be an educator, how to be a principal. And so it didn't resonate with me until literally a year later. I'm sitting, it was my first year as a principal, and we decided this is the year we should have a baby. False. But we were sitting in delivery room, and my older daughter's adopted. And her birth mom is named Sam, who is angel sent from heaven for my family and I, and we are thankful for her every day. And my husband went to go get her whatever she wanted. She got everything. And so it was just her and I. And that's a really difficult moment because you're sitting there waiting to become a parent for the first time. And she was waiting to not be a parent. And I just remember her sitting there and she rubbed her belly. And she said, Penny, I love this baby. I love this baby. And I want her to have everything in the world. And I can't give that to her right now. But I think that you and Paul can. And so I'm giving you my baby. And in that moment, becoming a parent, the first thing I thought was that Deshawn said the exact same thing to me a year before when she was talking about giving Sean to the school every day. So when I think about educators and I think about teachers, I think about our parents who pack up their kids, their lunches, their backpacks, their homework. They put them in buses and cars and scooters and they walk and drive and they drop their children off every day at the front door and they give us their babies. There is no greater responsibility that any of us have than to take a child every day and promise that parent that you are going to do right by that child in the same way that you would want someone to do right by your own. The privilege, the responsibility, the stress, the joy, it's all there. And we have our kids for most of their waking hours for 13 years. What a job. What a job. And so for the rest of my life, the picture that I have in my office is a picture of my little Ellie sitting on a chair with my little Sean as he reads her a book that first year of kindergarten. Because it reminds me that my responsibility is to treat and love the children that I'm responsible for as my own. Because our parents every day give us their babies. And so there's lots of things we can talk about policy, there's a lot of things we can talk about practice, and I want to get into even more classrooms, just over 200 so far. And there's so many joys and celebrations that I see in your work every single day, and I cannot wait to talk about it. But at the end of the day, I understand that my ultimate responsibility is for every single one of those children who walk through the doors and the promise we make to families to provide them with an education and to ensure that at the end of the day, they get their children back. And that matters deeply. So if you want to know anything about me, it's that story. It's Sean and Ellie. That's what I'm about every day when I wake up. It's what I'm about every night when I go to bed. I am so grateful for the work that you do. It is so hard. It is so hard, and it's gotten harder and harder and harder every year. What I ask and what I hope is that you continue to send feedback. I get dozens and dozens and dozens of emails and calls every week. Please continue to send the feedback. Please continue to tell us how we can do better and more right by our kids. It matters deeply. And I cannot wait to get in your classrooms. It is the highlight of my week every day. Thursdays, I go into schools. There's nothing better than to see what's happening between our educators and our children. You are the reason we have a strong and getting stronger and stronger public education system in this state. I am behind you, and I'm very deeply grateful. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.